name is Ibrahim Ali. I'm 27 years old. I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and my mother and my father were Catholic. I was raised Catholic. My father passed away when I was 4, 26 years old, so that was a pretty early death. And when that happened, my mother kind of fell away from the Catholic Church. She kind of had, I guess you could say, like a grudge with God after that. And so I got into studying other religions really early on. I was kind of a dorky kid. I liked to read, and, one thing led to another. So I got into like Eastern religions, studying about, Buddhism, Hinduism, stuff like this. I recently just found out today, actually, my mother was telling me that, my grandmother said that if I would have stuck with the church, she thinks I would have became a priest. But, obviously, we plan and God plans, so that didn't happen. My mother got remarried, and I moved down here to Florida at about the time I was 14. When I came here to Florida, we moved to Polk County, which is kind of like outside of Kissimmee. And I was living in a house with my mother, my stepfather, his sister, her son, his mother, and 3 other people. So this was a lot of people in one little house. And so, I was young. My, mother had just got remarried. So I was going through the whole rebellious thing and, not getting along with my stepfather, not getting along with his family well, and, trying to adjust to moving from up north to down south, and, just so getting into a lot of trouble and things like this. Eventually we moved out, and, we got our own place. I was in high school, and, kind of got involved with the wrong people, got into different things here and there. So as I grew up a little bit, I moved into 3 group homes consecutively. I got out of the last one around the time I turned 18, right around there. And just continuous fighting with my stepfather and with my family, and I ended up living in hotels in Kissimmee, by myself. And this was like, being 18, living on your own in hotels. And so anyways, I don't want to dwell too much on this, but eventually, I had a drinking problem. I started going to Alcoholics Anonymous eventually. And after a few attempts of, trying to quit and then going back out, and then, I finally got on, the wagon. I stayed sober for a while, and, I'm still sober from that time, thank God. And, before then, I had got hit by a car crossing the highway. So, I broke like 2 bones in my right leg. They had to put a rod in my leg. I practically had to learn how to walk again. All of these things, it was really miraculous the way that it happened, because, the car hit me just head on. And I'd like to say that stopped me and got me on the right track, but it didn't, right away. After that, it was the same thing, like drinking in my wheelchair and just, being stupid. But eventually, I got sober and I stopped. And, so at some point, I decided that, I needed to start looking for religion again, looking for some kind of higher power. They emphasize this a lot when you're in recovery. They tell you, you need some kind of higher power. It doesn't matter what it is, but you need some kind of spiritual connection, and I went everywhere, man. At one point I tried to get back into Christianity, and, that didn't work, At one point I got into Judaism for a little bit, and that didn't last either. The thing about Judaism, of course, for once, for one, it's not that you can't convert, but it's a very long process to convert, you know. So there's that, and then also, you know, I mean, there's the issue with Zionism, you know, and like how much the Jewish religion has gotten, I don't want to say the religion, but Jews as, you know, a group have gotten tainted by the ideology of Zionism, and, you know, it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth. But anyways, so there was a friend of mine who I went to high school with who had moved to New York, and this person had become Muslim, I found out. And I remember speaking to this person about Islam, and it kind of went on from there. I guess, you know, I mean, from what my mother is telling me, and for what, like, my family was saying, it seems that early on as a child, I had some kind of religious, like, inclination in me, you know. And for some reason, I guess, you know, ultimately because of, you know, Allah's plan and things like this, the direction that it was going in, as far as, you know, where my family was pushing me, wasn't working. But there was something in there that wanted to seek for God, you know. And I guess, you know, like, I remember just, even though I was doing so much bad, you know, like the drinking and the drugs and, you know, the fighting and everything else that goes along with that, you know, I think at a certain point I got bored of it, you know. Like I remember I really got upset one night just because I knew that the life I was living, like, it's like you get that feeling like there has to be more to life than this, you know, like this by itself, it's just not enough, you know. I didn't like me. I didn't like my life. I was sick of it, you know. You know, and the whole 12-step ideology revolves around the idea that, like, you need a higher power because you're weak. You by yourself as an individual, you know, it's like your own thinking got you into this mess. So there has to be something stronger than you to pull you out, because, you know, by yourself, you're just destroying everything, you know. And I guess that was true, you know. As much as, like, my own mind was upset with the way that things were going and the way that my life was and my own self-destructiveness and, you know, on and on. As much as I intended to do good or I wanted to change, I couldn't. You know, I kept just getting into the wrong situation and making the wrong choices and doing all kinds of bad. I remember, like, I found this out because I was hanging out with somebody and they pulled this person up on Facebook, you know, and I think I noticed, you know, that they were Muslim. Like, I think I saw them wearing hijab, you know. I was like, oh, you know, they're Muslim now? And, you know, I started speaking to this person. And so one day, you know, we started talking about Islam, you know, and I had, like, certain misconceptions, you know, certain, like, preconceived notions. And I was, you know, kind of like discussing these things with this person, and they were answering all my objections. You know, they were telling me, you know, explaining it the way, you know, that they understood it. So that same day, you know, something clicked. I realized that, you know, something made me want to accept Islam from what this person was telling me. You know, I remember they told me, like, you know, you should say your Shahada now, because if you don't, you know, what if, you know, I mean, kind of like, God forbid something should happen to you between now and, like, if you do it later, and then you never get the chance to say it. So, I said it over the phone. You know, I said the Shahada over the phone, and, later that night also I went to a masjid, and I said my Shahada with the brothers there at the masjid. I think honestly, for myself anyways, and probably for other people that convert too, from what I've seen, there's kind of like this period where everything is wonderful. You know, you have this real beautiful view of like, you know, other people and life, you know, and but then after a while, it's like you start getting these tests and you start seeing that like, you know, the people that you thought were so great are human beings too, and they're flawed, and, you know, so you kind of have to like reassess these ideas. So, you know, one thing that really got me, and I don't just mean this as a polemic against Sunnis or anything like that, but one issue I had like with certain people in this community was that there was a lot of like emphasis on fiqh, you know, like to the point where like you know, there was one brother outside of masjid one time just going off about like, you know, this guy did something in the salat that wasn't correct, you know, and it's just very, things like this make it seem very petty, you know, like very, superficial, you know, but it definitely took time to adjust as far as like incorporating, you know, Islamic rules into my life. And I think at first, when I first accepted Islam, I was very, kind of harsh, you know, in like the way that I practiced and in the way that I related to like, you know, astaghfirullah, but the way that I related to my family, you know, because you know, I guess like it took time because it's such a contradiction to come from like this place of like absolute lawlessness to incorporating like all these rules, you know, and so when you put that much structure in with somebody who's so used to like no structure, it's like you accept it, but at the same time you're so intense about it because, you know, it's hard to explain, but so I know at a certain time later there was kind of a burnout phase, you know, because I was so harsh and so tough about like sticking to the rules, and then eventually it was like I can't do this anymore. It's too much. I know that at a certain point I was kind of looking for something more while I was Sunni, because, you know, I know that like traditional Sunni Islam, right, there was a spiritual science that was incorporated along with like fiqh and aqaid and things like this, you know, like tasawwuf, you know, like cleansing the heart. And I didn't see this, you know, at least not like in a pronounced way. It just seemed very like, you know, you come to the masjid and you pray and you just observe like the 5 pillars of Islam and this is sufficient, you know, or you go and you do the Tablighi Jamaat thing. But I know at a certain point, like I started reading about Sufism, you know, and I guess there was some lack that I felt there as far as actually like, you know, spirituality, as opposed to just the outward practice of the religion. But I remember one night I was reading Quran in the masjid. This was really the definitive moment that really kind of changed everything. This was a Sunni masjid, and I was reading the Quran, and I had tafsir in the Quran. And I came to Ayatul Tathir, verse 33. And the commentary in the Quran, in the Sunni masjid, said that this Ahlul Bayt is the 5, you know, the people of the cloak. And that same night, I called this person that I took my shahada with, you know, and I was basically like, you know, why aren't we following these people? Because Allah himself is saying, you know, I've thoroughly purified these people, but I go to the masjid and I hear about everyone else except for these people, you know, and this person, obviously there was a little bit of debate back and forth on the phone about this. And so, let's see, you know, after that, I started doing my own research,